Hello, and welcome to another episode of the DevLab podcast. Today's pod is brought to you in partnership with bet365. At bet365, they pride themselves on being a global leader in online gambling and a catalyst for technological advancement. They empower their teams to push boundaries and explore new ideas, ensuring that team members have the opportunity to contribute to the company's ongoing success in the technology landscape. Today, we're joined by Adam Davis, who is a Senior Systems Development Manager at bet365, and we're going to discuss scaling software, leading change, and the Go effect at bet365. So, Adam, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thanks, Phil. Good to be
Excellent.
here.
Yeah, no, great to have you here. Really excited to get into it. We've got some fantastic topics to go through today. But look, I think a great place to start on any podcast, any conversation. Let's get to know you a little bit more. So why don't you talk us through your journey so far? How did you get into tech in the first place? And then what ultimately led you to your current role at bet365?
Sure. Yeah, thanks. So I guess my entrance into technology came at quite an early age, really. My grandfather was quite a pivotal figure in my introduction to tech, in the sense that he would often work with me when things were broken to fix things. So that might be an old record player, a VHS sort of player. He was one of these characters in my life that when something was broken, we wouldn't just throw it away, we'd try and fix it. And that kind of curiosity kind of extended to other things as I got other technologies brought into my world. So when I had my first computer, I was very interested about how websites were built, how functionality on websites worked. And that kind of led to me then going, how do I build that thing for myself? How do I, make those things? So I spent a number of months and years very early on, like in my teenage sort of years, just messing around with websites. And then as I got into a pivotal point within my own sort of juncture within education, at the sort of towards the end, it was a decision really whether I go off and do something completely different, or I go further into education and do more along committing myself to go into tech really. So that kind of the direction I went in. I did a kind of further computing at college, and then ultimately I went to Staffs Uni and did a computer games programming degree. And that was a good degree for me because effectively it had multiple different disciplines in it. It had advanced mathematics, it had lots of things around different programming languages, had lots of things around how things were structured. So I guess from a games programming point of view, it touches on lots of different disciplines, not just actually making games. It's like how do things talk to each other? How do networks work? From an infrastructure perspective, it was an entire new world of problems. So I kind of did my university sort of stint. I did a placement year throughout that as well, which was part of a web development company, which was cool because it got me exposed to customers, kind of project delivery, and building the confidence to speak to the vendors and other people that weren't just students and other colleagues, which was nice. And then post that, I did a bit of contracting, and then I worked for an email marketing company for about 10 years, effectively working my way up from junior developer all the way up to software engineering director. So responsible for the entirety of the SDLC from, building out software, testing it and releasing it. That all kind of fell into my world. And really, my interest grew as I went on that path, really. It was more about how can I go from just being an individual contributor to enabling teams to deliver at pace, to scale, and solve problems. Most of my kind of curiosity is all around how do I solve a problem, and it's not necessarily centered on a particular language or framed around a particular technology. It's like how do we do something to improve delivery or improve a team's cadence. And in my previous role that was amazing because I had that full remit, and I got to a point really in that role where it got to a place where it was really happy, really good with it, and then kind of wanted to take all that learning and do it in a different environment. And the opportunity at Bet came along. Effectively 3 years ago, I started my journey at Bet, and the role presented itself as a place where we were moving to go. That journey had just about started before I arrived, but effectively we wanted to aggressively ramp up that. We wanted to scale out the teams as we went into new markets, which had its own operational sort of challenges as well. And then also scaling some of those processes that may have worked well for smaller teams, but when you grow to much larger sizes, some of those processes don't scale. So that opportunity presented itself, and I kind of just took it with both hands, really. It was like, this is a great time to learn everything I did in a much smaller organization of about 60 people, to one which is thousands and sort of global across the world, really.
Fantastic. Excellent. Yeah, great summary. One thing I wanted to kind of touch on, because I think it's interesting for, I'm sure a lot of people out there listening, what was that transition like moving from a company you'd been with for 10 years? You probably knew everything ins and outs, right? You knew every nook and cranny within the business into a much bigger business where I suppose there was a lot to learn. What was that kind of transition like?
It was quite scary, to be honest, because like you say, when you've built up all that domain knowledge, I remember my first day walking through the doors, realizing that I have nothing to rely on. I don't have any prior experience. I knew a couple of people at Bet, but ultimately I didn't really know anybody apart from my new boss and the hiring manager that was with my boss at the time. So that kind of, it was anxiety inducing, I think, because basically I left behind a world I was very comfortable with. But one thing that I've always been quite keen on is when I've been really comfortable, it's probably a sign that something needs to change. Like I need to be challenged. So joining Bet was a great thing, but you're very right. Joining an organization where you don't know the ins and outs about the company, how it works, what does the SDLC look like, it was kind of pretty scary. But equally, those were my first couple of objectives at the company. So my first couple of weeks and months were, how do I understand how the team releases software into production? What makes it difficult? What makes it hard? Who are key players in that kind of process? And that kind of formed my own mental onboarding plan as I joined Bet, really. What do we need to do to get stuff done, even from a development point of view? So if I'm a developer, what does that look like from a developer experience to get stuff into live? Because ultimately that's what it all boils down to. But yeah, it was quite a scary sort of experience, but it was a good one, I think. I really enjoyed it and embraced it, but I used that as my catalyst to figure out how I could form my first couple of days and weeks.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I couldn't agree more. I think when you feel incredibly comfortable in a role, that is, the sign that you need to get on that next learning curve and take yourself out of your comfort zone. And that's ultimately how we'll grow and develop as individuals. Yeah, I think some great wisdom to kind of share with any of the listeners just there. Wanted to kind of focus on Go and the kind of power of functional programming to start. I don't know if you were necessarily involved in that initial decision to onboard Go. If you were, like, why, why is it that Bet chose to kind of bring Go into the tech stack? What drew the team to kind of adopt it? And could you maybe share some real world examples of how it's improved the scalability and the reliability of the system?
Yeah, so it was a decision that was made prior to my arrival. What I would say, though, is the company was on that trajectory for maybe only about a year or two before I arrived. So some teams were in different stages of that transition. So the mandate to move really was kind of governed by a couple of different aspects. So Bet's been around for an awful long time. When you've been around for an awful long time like that, you do end up building these monolithic type structures, and most of those structures become shared structures as well. So you've got teams effectively all working on the same product area or the same code bases. That doesn't really scale as you add more people. So the opportunity really is then to look at how can you break those things down and determine how can you make it easier. So Go is a great language in that sort of respect, because its whole remit is to be not object oriented. So in .NET, classically, everything was object oriented. You've got lots of classes. It's very heavyweight. You've got inheritance. From a Go perspective, you kind of don't have that. It's very procedural. It's very simple. It's quite a simple language. It can do a lot less than .NET, but also that's one of its strengths, right? So when you're looking at the code, it's actually more readable and easier to see. The operational challenge there is to figure out how you can get that adoption across the board in terms of how do you train those individuals. Bet has been a predominantly .NET house through that entire time. Making sure that those services can transition is always going to be difficult, because effectively it's not just a case of saying we're going to use a new technology. It's how do you keep the lights running and start that migration process. So how do you start moving services into Go while still delivering, typical BAU work? So from an infrastructure point of view, Go is really good. It's very lightweight. From a .NET perspective, you need a lot of Windows sort of kit to underpin it. It's much more complex in terms of kind of code and layout, mainly around things I mentioned before around the object-oriented side of things. Goes really portable and lightweight and works really well from a point of view of where we're trying to get to a next phase of our life cycle, which is moving to cloud. Whilst you can kind of put some .NET services into cloud, it kind of doesn't make sense, because again, they're quite heavyweight services. Memory footprint, CPU footprint is really, really lightweight. It also does some things out of the box that perhaps aren't as simple from a .NET perspective, in the sense you've got things like Go routines, channels. Doing those things on .NET feel a bit more cumbersome, a bit more taxing. And you just don't, you kind of get a lot of that for free whilst moving into Go, really. But the difficulty for us is, one, it's not just picking the language. Yes, you get a load of simplicity by moving, but it's also how do you get the folks on board to use it, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I guess, was that involved hiring and bringing in new kind of specialists in Go, or was it really a big drive to retrain the kind of current software developers and current staff within the team?
Yeah, so we there was a number of SMEs within different teams that were nominated as mentors. So that effectively they would be responsible for delivering out a training package. And that was a kind of a standard training package. We call it a boot camp. It's basically, as a new starter or someone who needed to enroll on that training program, you'd do a couple of tasks. Those tasks would teach you fundamentally how to use Go, but they'd also teach you about things which we consider to be like bet365ism. So that might be performance concerns, small things that might not necessarily be a problem in a different organization could potentially be an issue in our structure because of the way the business is set up, or there's an operational constraint around performance in that particular area. We try and teach developers that using certain parts of Go may or may not be the right thing to do here because of these reasons. So typically our bootcamp is like 3 different kind of courses or agendas. Individuals will work on those kind of by themselves with support of a mentor. As they complete each one of those packages, a mentor will sign it off. They'll typically do a presentation at the end to say, this is what I've built. And that'll meet a kind of a standard, really. So I bet we have that kind of standard to go. Everyone's kind of completed this training. Some teams have modified that training to be more aligned with their particular needs for their kind of team, because each team's slightly different. So we don't mind that. And then effectively those mentors will kind of sign it off. So even if someone comes in and joins the organization with 10 years Go experience, we would typically put them through the same training material because it teaches those bet365isms, which are kind of bespoke to us in some ways. That's not to belittle people. It's there to go, we do some things in a particular way with the Go language. It's worth being aware of these, and you'll kind of find these in a safe environment going through that boot camp. So you're right. We've nominated SMEs within the business who are really, really strong developers, but then also we've brought in some best-in-class Go developers to join that kind of effort. And then as we've kind of ramped up and hired people, we've put everyone through the same kind of training package. So we've got that level of consistency across the board by virtue of kind of having that, if that makes sense.
Awesome. Yeah, no, sounds like a really sensible way of doing things. And I suppose for the, the existing team, that must have been a really exciting journey to go on. Developers, engineers are always looking to learn new skills. So if you get the opportunity to do that as part of your day-to-day work, then, what could be better?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. And I suppose what's the, what have been the biggest wins? Is it really that scalability, that reliability that Go has given you? Have you seen a real tangible impact on the system performance?
Yeah, so I guess we've gained some performance in different ways. So as we've got some of these monolithic type structures, when we've broken them down, it's been an opportunity to re-architect them. So having a single or shared code base when you've got multiple teams vying to change that code base means that release cadence is difficult, because effectively you've got multiple teams trying to change the same product area that's shared across different teams. Moving to Go has basically allowed us to either re-architect services that are simpler, easier to manage, but then the kind of the biggest benefit, and it's not necessarily just Go alone, it's just the re-architecture of taking what is in a monolithic type structure and then divvying that up back to the team. So for example, we might have had previously 4 teams making one change to a shared component because it would service those 4 teams. We've now got 4 individual components for those teams. So that means those teams can individually release things. They can release them in parallel. They're no longer tightly coupled to what was, a singular structure. So for us, that's brought us improved release cadence. Something that would perhaps be a cumbersome change because 3 teams had to make change to one product area because they all had a part to play. They can now individually make changes to their own products. And that's quite important as we've kind of built out teams, really. We want teams to have that overarching control of their own kind of products. So as we've moved monoliths into Go services and broken them down, we've re-architected them. But equally, those teams that change that code or have a part to play in it, they now own that product, if that makes sense. So shared products that may have housed 4 different teams worth of functionality now become individual in nature. From a kind of an architectural point of view, obviously we've got the benefits of making the code simpler by doing a rewrite. We've also obviously got improved performance off the back of it. So hosting lots of Windows kit and lots of boxes, typically from a cost perspective, is much greater than using Go. Go's footprint for some of our heaviest hitting services, we don't really need many services in our live estate to support some of the high intensity of traffic that we would have. And Bet's really kind of from an operational perspective, we see various different demands on our infrastructure, right? So we've got things like the Grand National, where we get unpredicted levels of traffic on site, and we somehow have to, predict what that might look like, and it's very difficult.
Yeah.
And we've got various different mechanisms at our disposal through on-prem architecture and GCP, but being able to have something like Go, which really, generally speaking, has a very low footprint in terms of memory and CPU, from a cost perspective, that translates to, quite a considerable saving. So sometimes it's not just having the code simpler, it's actually what other benefits do you yield from it? So you're right, part of that benefit is around potential cost savings from an operational point of view. There's other things that we get from Go as well, in terms of we've got different strategies to release. So Releasing .NET products is slightly a bit more cumbersome in live. And for our Go products, it's pretty much instant. We can instantly roll out changes and roll them back. In the .NET world, that's not as possible. We can do those operations, but they just take a bit longer. So it goes really, the biggest thing it's brought us is agility. The ability for a developer to make a change, for it to get tested and go out the door is night and day. And from a test point of view as well, it's that experience that they can test singular endpoints. Previously, before, they might have had to test a big monolith, and that might have been a load of manual tests, right? They might have had to go onto the website, log in, do several different operations. Now they've got several different endpoints in a Go service. They can run a load of automated tests. So from that point of view, we can get changes in and out the door from developer writing a line of code, automated tests being run, to in live and, in minutes potentially, which, 3-4 years ago was a very, very different story.
Yeah, for sure. And look, I'm sure that's music to the ears of anyone out there listening, thinking about their next opportunity. Ultimately, engineers want to be building things, releasing things, and seeing the impact of what they've built within, the kind of shortest feedback loop as possible. So the fact that you're now able to deploy quicker and efficiently, I'm sure, again, is like I said, music to the ears of anyone listening in. What does it move next on to kind of the teams that you've led and some of the kind of learnings you've had in kind of building out different teams? And you kind of touched on it there. The transition to Go has been one of those, I suppose, those shifts that you've been through. What have been some of the biggest leadership learnings for you in kind of leading teams through these transitions?
Yeah, so when I joined initially, I was part of a team of 14, and one of the remits of that was to grow it out. It's now about 56 in size, that team. I'm kind of indirectly responsible for it now as my role's moved on. But one thing that was really difficult for me when I first joined is, it goes back to what you said before. Operationally, you don't have the knowledge of how the team works. It's kind of understanding of what do those individuals in that team have problems with that I can help with, and what can I do in the first couple of weeks or months that will take some of the pain away. And what I noticed was, there'll be some things like, how do we deploy things? That might be a question in terms of how do we deploy faster? And Bet's a really big organization, so lots of these problems have been solved by different teams, but different teams own and do different things. So whilst you can get advice and seek input from others, sometimes you are presented with a unique challenge. So one thing I tried to do in my sort of early stages of kind of leading this brand new team was understanding what were their pain points. And some of those pain points were kind of manageable when the team was 14. But as you start to hire lots of people and bring more people into the team, those little niggles become quite big problems. So it's trying to figure out what are the emerging problems. And sometimes those things might just be little paper cuts. But the moment you add 5 more people, those paper cuts become slightly deeper. And this particular scenario, deployment was a bit of an issue. We had some issues in the team around being able to have a multi-tenanted environment. The team was predominantly at that point, probably 40% the way through migrating from .NET to Go. We needed to accelerate that to hiring lots of new people. But the team really struggled with having multiple versions of Go services in different various states at the same time. So part of that was architecting like a multi-tenanted system that could host rapidly spin up Go environments on demand. So we actually just within a meeting room, whiteboard session, kind of going over what this would look like at high level. And within about 4 or 5 days, with a bit of direction, we kind of built out a system that would effectively give the team a rapid way of provisioning its Go services and providing those services to other teams. So this team was a middleware-centric team. Its services get called from the websites, from different teams within the business. Some of those are back office tools, not always basically customer facing. So it's been able to provide a system that will provide ways in which other teams can call different versions of services. Testers need various different services in different states, depending on different projects. Other teams just want a stable version of the service. They don't want to be pointing at a janky dev service that's going down every 2 minutes. They just want stable. So that was kind of my initial remit, was to find those little paper cuts and try and use my experience and get the right people in a room. So as a leader, and especially coming into Bet, I don't have all the answers. I don't know the technology. I can appreciate problems at high level, but what I like to think I'm good at is putting the right people in the room, whiteboard it out, let's figure out some options, because we've got a vast amount of resources, some incredibly smart people. There's pretty much always going to be a way forward to some of these issues. And as I mentioned there, within about 4 or 5 days, we had a very rough prototype of being able to rapidly spin up multi-tenanted environments. Now, other teams in Bet have solved this problem, but that problem was very unique to us and how we needed to service some of our needs to our external customers. And those aren't just customers on the website, there are customers within business. So some of those pre-existing solutions just wouldn't fit. So it's on me as kind of a leader within the team to go, look, how can we carve a way forward and make that work? And I think from a difficulty perspective, it goes back to what you said before. Not knowing all the domains is challenging, but I think if you can get in a room, you can talk to people, you more often than not find a way forward. And I think that's kind of what you've got to do to get respective engineers and developers and testers to support you on that journey.
Yeah, 100%. I think the respect, the respect definitely comes from the openness to nuance. I think where developers, engineers sometimes get frustrated is when there can be a bit of a dogmatic approach or almost like a
Yeah.
one size fits all approach that you try to fit, square pegs, round holes. Whereas actually, to your point of doing that discovery, really understanding the individual needs of each team and what works for each team, I think you then get that respect back, right? And it really is a
Yeah.
motive.
Absolutely. And I think that's it. That's the thing. It's when you're coming into a new organization, you are just the new person. And I think that you do have this label attached to you where it's like, this guy probably thinks he knows everything. He knows, he's going to tell us how to work. And the opposite's really true. You've got to prove that you're not here to go, this is how it used to work in my last place. And I got loads of results, because that thing may not work here. And I think the moment you start kind of drilling that into people, it's like, yeah, I don't know best. You or us collectively probably can figure out a good solution. It's probably the best way forward. But yeah, that having that label of going, this used to work somewhere else, therefore it will work here, doesn't always transpire to be the case.
Yeah, for sure. To help me to help you, right? It's how
Correct.
can I
Yeah.
help facilitate what you need from a system. Awesome. No, and I think look really speaks, not just to your own approach, which sounds, fantastic. And I'm sure, as I said, the team really appreciate it, but also that wider approach of Bet365 and the openness to, allow for this type of system and this type of nuance between different teams. When we think about kind of identifying and growing future leaders within the teams, what's your approach there? Do you have any particular examples of how you've kind of cultivated those leaders for the future?
Yeah, I think there's a combination of different things. So there's definitely a different range in terms of different leaders. You've got some people who are really, really technical, and you've got people who are less technical. And I think there's a place for both. And then there's a sweet spot in the middle. Again, there's a place for that too. From my point of view, what I've always done trying to identify new leaders is understanding how they kind of behave with others. Because fundamentally, you can be technically excellent, but if you are terrible with people, it's just not going to work, right? Not being able to know your audience, so that might be different stakeholders at different levels within the business. You've got to be able to be professional. You've got to be able to be courteous. You've got to be able to be empathetic as well. If you're talking to a different department, their needs will probably be very different from your own. How can you kind of bridge that gap? Also, if you're line managing people or looking after people, there has to be an element of being able to understand people can create psychological sort of safety around your team and give them a kind of what would be a comfortable home for them to express their feelings, be honest and open with you. And I think there's an element of also understanding that you can handle or juggle multiple things. As a leader, you've got to be able to juggle different priorities. That might be, product want X, Y, and Z. You've also got this build over here that's failing. You've got someone off sick. How can you spin all these plates and still make this weird combination of things that's being thrown at you on a daily basis still work? But for me, it's being able to see that how people interact with people is really core for me. It's less about being technically amazing, because you can be technically ace, but if you can't work with people and get things done, it's just not going to work. And I think for me, I've always been able to relate to those individuals that are able to work with people to get things done. In the same way I said when I joined the organization, I don't have anything to fall back on other than relationships, building relationships with people that can influence change. And through those relationships, you can make that happen. I can take ownership of something and try and spearhead something through. But ultimately, if you're not good at building relationships and understanding how people tick, and that's really, really difficult. And that might just be, having a brew with someone for 10 minutes. Maybe you don't work with them for very often, but actually, that time when you need them once a month to do something, you've already got that relationship there. So from my point of view, I got into leadership from a development role, working my way up. And the reason I kind of got into management was I saw a manager that was treating someone in a way I didn't think I wouldn't want to be treated, if that makes sense. And I always thought I could probably do better than that. So my approach has always been to try and uplift people, bring them on a journey, and not be overly technical at the same time. So I'm quite techie by nature, but I'm also kind of I can be removed from it. I'm very people focused, people oriented. I like to understand what makes them tick to deliver the best results. My individual, I'm not an individual contributor, and I think a leader should be able to identify what they can bring to the table, but what other types of people and skill sets make a great team. And I normally do that through observation. So those characters, especially at bet365, we've got an abundance of really strong leaders and emerging leaders. You'll see some of those patterns emerge over time. And some people go, I just want to test the waters. I want to demonstrate myself in this space. And it might be they've led a really good project, but they've also pulled a group of individuals together that have never worked together before, and they've been able to deliver something really, really well, but they've done that in a way which has brought those individuals with on that journey. So for me, it's really just observation, finding those characters that want to do it, because I think the worst leaders are the ones that have just been put in place. They were never born to be a leader. They probably didn't want to be a leader. But for those people who've just thought, yeah, I actually really like working with people, I like managing people. There's a lot of bad things that, around managing people as well. You've got to appreciate, it's not just all the rosy good stuff. It's all the difficult, hard problems and hard challenges. And I think when you see people naturally leaning into that, I've always tried to have those conversations with people to go, look, is this something you'd like to do? But equally, I've had conversations with individuals that have perhaps thought they were on that journey, perhaps weren't. So it's then just a case of going, bearing down on reality in terms of how do you get exposure to, looking after teams, delivery. Ultimately, is that what you want to do? Because some people think they want to go into management because they think that's the best way I can progress my career. I'm going to be a manager. I'm going to, that's my progression path. Where ultimately they might just want to be a more principal developer or a team leader, or look after a smaller subset of things and not have to look after a wide range of things. So I think there's always been that common misconception within technology that actually I'll get a manager title, that's my progression. Ultimately, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, definitely. I think I think that myth's getting busted more and more. We're seeing the emergence of the kind of staff level role in a lot of different companies as well now, which maybe 5-10 years ago you didn't really hear that title so much. And principal obviously has been around for a long time. But no, I think there's definitely something to what you say, and kind of learning more from maybe the bad managers, or what not to do. In the same way we learn more from constructive feedback than kind of positive reinforcement, sometimes it's easier when you kind of like, okay, yeah, that's not the route I would go down. And for sure, I think, a big job of a manager is almost helping people to understand what is right for them and having those catch ups and those conversations. And, as you say, maybe identifying where someone might be really strong hands-on and actually their route should be in a more of an IC pathway than perhaps the management side of things. We're going to come on to kind of discussing how career progression is supported more broadly at Bet. And within that kind of topic, I'd love to discuss like how someone actually goes on that journey to become a leader. But before we do, just wanted to focus on the team itself. So what does a strong software team look like to you? And what do you think is the glue that makes a strong team tick?
Yeah, so for me, when I joined Bet, I'll use that as a good kind of foundation to start from. The team was already in a semi sort of healthy place in terms of, they had been there for a long period of time. Bet's got, most of its staff have had quite a long tenure, or there's a mixture of those folks within the organization across a lot of different teams. So you've got people in the team that have been there for a long time. They know the domain. They already get on kind of well together. One of the worries I had was, scaling the team out quite rapidly. Would that disrupt what we already had? So what I perceived to be successful at the time was, the team were quite honest and open around what the challenges were, operational problems they faced. Socially and culturally, they seemed to work quite well. But equally, I was also aware that I'm going to hire another 20, 30 people into this team. Potentially going to be some upset caused by hiring people, because it's not easy, it's difficult training people, putting them in through that boot camp, and there's an initial tax you've got to pay in terms of onboarding folks. The initial folks would bear the brunt of some of that. For me, really is understanding when things are going wrong. So as I hired more people, some of those weren't the most perfect hires. When you grow teams, I think managers also need to understand when you've made a decision or you've hired someone that doesn't necessarily fit. So at Bet, we've got really high technical standards. Not everybody will meet those standards. So it's being able to address those and uphold those standards across the team. And that isn't necessarily for new hires, that's for behavioral patterns or challenges. As a manager, you have to throw yourself and lean into those problems, which I've kind of touched on before, are difficult. Those are the people stuff, right? You can't always just assume that teams will operationally always run well. It's kind of a bit like a garden almost. Weeds will appear every so often. As a manager, you've got to react to those. And I think the best functioning teams are the ones where team leaders and managers are reacting to problems, and specifically around people problems. That might be performance concerns. It might be a new hire isn't doing what we need. Do they need more support? And then reacting to those things. Because when you're growing aggressively, what you don't want to do is start lowering standards and increasing the burden on the existing team, because you're trying to improve delivery cadence, or equally you don't want to slow it down long term. And I touched on there around knowing when things are going wrong. One thing I try and do periodically is a bit of a sense check. So that might be an anonymous survey with the team itself to go, be like 3 questions. What's working well? what's not working, and have you got any other feedback about how we currently operate? And then maybe every couple of months we would look at that feedback and go, there's one or two items here that seem to be a common pattern. And we can't necessarily fix everything, but what we can do is maybe fix one or two things. When I first joined, it's something I did when I joined initially, and that led to me understanding that was a bit of a deployment issue. The team were frustrated with this. And I used to do this at my previous gig as well, in terms of using this as a bit of a sense check to go, what is working, what isn't. Based on that, I would pick one or two things with some of the team and go, how do we address these problems, and then demonstrate to the team that we're going to address these things. Doing a town hall with the team to go, we've picked this problem. In the next 2 weeks, we're going to try and address it. 2 weeks goes by, another town hall. This is what we've done to try and move along that path to get closer to it. Because effectively, the individuals in that team want to know that you're doing something about a problem they've raised. The worst thing you can do is ask people what their problems are, and then nothing gets done. Even if you don't pick something of theirs, but they see, this collective list, nothing's happening. So we always try and do little strategies like that. Equally, it might be a case of just having a brew with somebody. Typically from time to time, I'll just bump into somebody getting a coffee or whatever, and I'll just sit and chat with them for 10 minutes. Indirectly understanding, what their thoughts and feelings are about a team running is important. So there's kind of glue work around building a bit of a culture and demonstrating that you've got the finger on the pulse through things like anonymous surveys and stuff like that. There's obviously other metrics in terms of like the overall team's cadence to meet project delivery, right? So being able to deliver stuff. How often is it responding to incidents outside of work in terms of call outs? So most of our teams have a on-call contingent. Are they getting many live issues? So if they got 20 live issues this week, why did that happen? What are we doing to mitigate it? Was that a self-inflicted injury? Was it something we didn't see? What do we do to mitigate that in the future? Was it something we missed? And then out of hours, operationally, when a live incident comes in, how do we quickly triage those incidents? Do they correctly go to the right team? Is that team, does it have the knowledge? So does the on-call person, are they able to react? Are they able to deal with different scenarios? So in those sort of situations, we try and do things like fire drill sessions to contrive scenarios. So we might say, server's gone down. You're an on-call developer. What do you do? Do you know what to do? And those kind of better prepare or battle harden people for those things. So in order to make strong teams, you kind of have to keep on doubling down on that. Because what I found was, you've got 14 individuals are pretty good, but the moment you scale it out, you've got some of these growth issues. We also need to repeatedly go over the same things to make sure all the newer folks coming on board hear the same message, understand the same type of thing we're trying to do, fire drill, surveys, trying to improve the team, honest, open feedback. The last thing we ever want is someone handing in the notice to go, I was really unhappy about that, when, you could have told us at the time. So we're really keen on promoting a culture of, we've got a lot of pressure on us to deliver in terms of the estate we look after and we operate in. We're a global organization, but equally it comes through having honest and open conversations. So there's a problem over here, but we've also got vast amounts of resources to address some of these things. But as a leader, it's important to react to various different problems, whether it's, people issues, system issues. But for me, really, a happy and healthy team is one that's, I hate to just stare down at numbers, because numbers don't always tell you kind of what's going on in a team. It's those conversations, those kind of the output from feedback when it's been initiated by leadership to go, is everything okay? Do you think it's working well? And, sometimes I've had feedback where I've submitted it, my first month or whatever, got some feedback, requested more feedback, and it's got worse. It's like, oh, okay, the thing I tried to do to make things better has had the opposite effect. And then it's basically holding your hands up to go, I don't have all the answers. Let's pivot, let's do a 180 on this. Because you will get some people who are so fixated, who think they're technically great, and you think, oh, well, you go down a track. And they're the worst type of leaders to go, you've got to sometimes look at the data and go, the team are giving you signs that this isn't working. You can get a lot of feedback from interfacing with them and talking to them. But then also working with the business, it goes back to what I said about call outs, product delivery, do product think, the service that we're providing to product, do they feel like their needs are being met from we're raising a piece of work and that's getting delivered on time? That might be not so great. How do we improve that? From a testing perspective, do testers feel like they're getting the right level of detail from when we're writing a piece of software to that handover on a ticket to go back to them to say, we've done this piece of work, but we forgot to tell you about all this other impact we've changed over here. That's not great. How do we improve that? So the team is kind of broad, really, when we talk about it. It's the kind of the management within it from a personal perspective, but it's also like operationally what makes a team successful. Is it delivering from a product point of view, a testing point of view, an infrastructure point of view? And I look at a number of these things. And I think generally if the team is delivering, it's generally delivering on what its expectations are. it's meeting its kind of SLAs for dealing with out of hours on call kind of issues. But equally within the team, there's a general kind of sense of happiness. Some of the best teams I can see, Friday they go out for a drink or they've got a social planned. When that's a regular thing, you think things are probably going pretty well in that space. It looks like it's holding its ground. It's not. We are here to work, but we're humans, right? We've got to understand what makes people tick. Got people who like climbing, so there's a climbing group. We've got people who like mountain biking, so there's a mountain biking group. There's all these sort of things. There's a hiking groups. A lot of us go hiking every so often, and it's trying to encourage those things as well to go. What are the things you like? What are the things you don't like? But a team is made up of various different personalities, but from an operational point of view, yes, there's all the things around delivery, operational sort of readiness, how do we deal with live issues, and looking at those metrics. But I kind of go a bit deeper into that. It's metrics. Good metrics are derived from having a happy and healthy team, and you can't always keep everyone happy, but if you can be shown to be looking like you're interested, you're paying attention, you're working towards addressing some problems because you can't address all, I think it generally goes down pretty well.
Yeah, 100%. Really, really well said, I think, and a really holistic approach to motivating people, right? Not looking at the gimmicky side of things, actually just really focusing on open communication, open feedback. And again, that social side of things, when people go hiking together or climb together, that feeds into that, right? You're more likely to be more open and honest and to take things in the right way and to actually feel comfortable communicating in an appropriate way. Awesome. Yeah, really, really well said. So next kind of final question around kind of the culture and growth side of things. I wanted to kind of focus in on career progression at Bet. So whether that's through skills or assessments, development plans, encouraging side projects, like what does it look like if I, either if I join as a junior, how do I progress through my kind of hands-on levels, or as we touched on a bit earlier, if I want to take that step into leadership, what's that kind of approach?
Yeah, so like you said, there's different levels there. I guess starting from kind of the ground up, we have a lot of graduates as well that come out of university that we support, but equally interns. So we have a number of interns that spend a short period of time with us, maybe a year, go back to university. Again, just to reiterate, our journey is pretty much the same for everybody. There's a series of training boot camps. Everybody will go through those boot camps and get that base level of technical knowledge. In terms of then progressing upwards from there, all teams are slightly different in the sense that, their needs to be able to support that team will perhaps be different from team A to team B. So there isn't a necessarily fixed development plan for one particular team, because actually operationally what you might need to do and know in that space will be very different from another space. But core values wise, there'll be various different technical competencies. So someone going from a intern, which will be a junior level role, to a mid-level role will need to kind of demonstrate certain criteria. So we have a couple of things in place like PDPs in terms of progression sort of plans, in terms of what competencies do you need to demonstrate to be able to articulate you can do something. And we always say to people that these aren't tick box exercise, right? So just because it says, might be something on there around like a junior developer going to mid-level, demonstrate you can deal with 20 support tickets. 20 is an arbitrary number. You might only have to do 5, but that the fifth one is really complicated. It's really difficult. You have to speak to 8 different people. But really what that is to start a bit of a conversation with either your line manager to go, what journey did you go on to complete these tickets? And hopefully it wasn't just a one line fix, handed over as a test, out the door, done. What we're really interested in is the time when it was really difficult and what did you do to get through that difficulty. It was like, I did the code change, it failed test, and there's this other thing over here, then I needed this database ticket, then I had to go and speak to the database folks, then the database folks told me to do this. And what did you learn from that? Oh, well, I met 5 different new people that could help me deliver these types of changes in the future. Okay, cool. Or there might be another change, I need to access the live estate. I need to be able to check some infrastructure, but I don't have permission, so I need to define someone to do that. So those PDPs, we always say to people, or those guidance documents are always there to give you a steer towards what you need to demonstrate from a technical competent perspective, but it shouldn't be used as a tick list. I've done something once doesn't make you a master at anything. But what it does do is say you've been able to demonstrate technically you can do something. Now, whether you can do it in all environments and all situations, probably not. But we're more interested in understanding, when you're looking at some of these kind of personal development plans, what your journey is to get there. And just because that checklist might look the same across the board for 5 individuals, what they do to get there could be very different. That they could have various different hardships to be able to achieve different things. And what that does, it just gives that bit of direction without being too prescriptive.
Yeah.
Equally, as we kind of move up from junior to mid-level to senior would expect some additional competencies there around showing more technical kind of competency around being in the live environment. So navigating a live estate safely within our governance policies, supporting individuals who are less senior, so mid-levels and junior, and what does that look like? Being able to potentially demonstrate in an on-call situation that you can deal with an issue in a timely manner, or triage it in a way which is in line with business kind of practices. But also coaching those individuals, what method are you using to kind of bring and elevate people to the same technical standards as you are. And then from that sort of pathway, really, we've obviously got continued technical journey. We've got principal developers, technical architects and leaders, and team leaders. And then it goes back to that point before, what do people take a decision? Do I want to go off into people management, or do I want to keep going down the technical route? And we support people on both. For people who are continued on that technical trajectory, they potentially might become less hands-on to the code. They might become more technical architects. They might be more around steering technical governance, like why are we picking Go as a language, for example, would come out of those forums. Why are we picking a new monitoring technology? But for those individuals that want to go into the management sort of route, what we try and do is within teams encourage some of that to happen without making it too formal. So that might be, maybe we've got a new project over here. Maybe you could demonstrate, you could lead it with 2 individuals. And then do you like it? So it's kind of a bit like a try before you buy, because we don't want to start creating a load of leaders that potentially go, oh, I've tried this and I want to go back into my technical role. So we always try and encourage people to do that where possible. Obviously, we've got formal management sort of training, but I'm a big believer that that's a complement to real world. And also bearing down the reality. So where we've had, where you get things around HR practices and processes, sometimes there's an opportunity for individuals to be a note taker in various different, formal ceremonies. And it's like, actually, do you want to be more in this world or not? And what we find is some people either lean into that and really want to do it, and it's like, we'll continue to embrace it. And other people will also then go, actually, maybe this isn't for me. And that's cool too. Some of those leaders are external. So, we will have folks who we hire that are just external to the business, who become team leaders and managers, a bit like myself. But equally, for those people who want to merge into those positions, we're always keen to support those folks as well, because typically they'll have some of the things I didn't have when I joined, right? They'll have some of the domain, but also want to manage people. And that's also a great, healthy thing. But equally, those external hires that don't have the domain, similar to myself, can be in a position where you can challenge things. It's like, why does that work there? You can ask the new starter question for at least a couple of months. Why do we do that? But yeah, we promote and support people in different ways, but naturally people do tend to go, do I want to be more technical? Do I want to be more hands-on with the management of projects and people? And there's many different pathways. It varies between teams, but what we're keen to do is that people can adopt those things at their own rates. We have a kind of a 2-year review process generally, where we look at people within the year to go, how are people getting on? Equally, throughout the year, we support folks to go, what pathway are you on? What competencies do you need to tick off? So, if we're looking at someone's development plan, it might be the case that they've done 70% of stuff. So would we really hold them back from becoming a mid-level developer? We probably wouldn't, because like you're well on your way. You're a great person within the organization. But for those folks that that haven't done some of those things, we've got high standards, very high standards. It might be a case, well, you do need to do those things, but also it's then on us to create you that opportunity. So where an individual struggling to get an opportunity to deliver on one of those competencies, it might just be because the work they're on doesn't permit them to be in that space. So it's then on us as a leadership group to go, well, we can put you into that space and help you get those things and exposure to expand your learning. And that's what those kind of portfolio kind of development plans are for. Less around a tick box exercise, more around about areas you need to cover to gain that kind of technical competence. And then for managers, it's more about how can you get yourself more involved in the ecosystem of delivery and looking after folks within teams.
Awesome. Great. And look, I think what really shines through again there is just that nuance and, treating people as individuals, understanding that everyone's different and going to have a different approach to learning, and different career paths are right for different people. So again, I think really speaks to that wider culture at Bet, that we discussed earlier when talking to the ways of working as well. So I think, again, for anyone out there listening in, considering their next move, I'm sure it's music to their ears. Final question, and then of course, anything we haven't had the chance to cover, anything else you wanted to kind of share, the floor is yours. But final question is kind of looking ahead. So what's next for your tech stack and your teams? And do you have any advice for any others considering a move to Go or rethinking how they structure their engineering work?
Yeah, so I guess for us, the future, looks looks a lot more like involving AI into what we do. I think that's a big buzzword, an emerging trend at the moment. But seriously, we are looking at how we use AI across our estate, from not just writing software, understanding the estate as well. One thing AI really does for us is we've got a load of internal tools some of our innovation team have built, where it helps articulate what's been built over the years. As a new starter, trying to understand, why is a database built in that way? Well, we've used AI to try to articulate how it's constructed and why. So you can ask some of our in-house tools that use AI to be able to condense down some of that complexity in ways that you can understand. So it's like, why is that database table called that? And what does it connect to? And what's it connected to critically? And it's like, it'll give you back answers to be able to give you some insight without having to, ask several dev DBAs or stuff like that, where previously it would be quite difficult. So looking at AI across the board, from being able to articulate what the estate currently looks like, what it's moving to using AI to help write software where it's possible to do so, help understand how we can solve some complex problems from a programming perspective. So we might have got a really big monolith service. We might use AI to try and help understand, which parts of the database is it call into? Does it need to make 2 calls there where it's making 2 calls? Could it be 1? If we moved it around, what would that look like? So using AI to be a companion to what we do and complement what we do. And equally, carrying that through along the SDLC. So from a testing perspective, what can we use AI for? From a risk perspective, can AI help model where risk is within the estate? So do we typically have more risk in one area than the other? Do we need to spend more time here or over there? Can we automate some of those tests over here that we perhaps weren't doing? End to end, really. So I don't think anyone at the moment can sit back on AI and go, it's just going to be this thing that washes over, isn't it? It won't be a thing. It's definitely a thing. And for us, it's definitely helping us now. And I suspect in the next, 3 to 6 months, that will kind of continue to grow at pace. So we will continue to do that and adopt it. Equally, we encourage all of our development staff within the organization to use it, use some of the tools we've built. We've got access to various different AI sort of assisted sort of tools within the IDE as well that will support developers. So Bet is very much embracing that from a technology point of view, which is great and exciting as well. It's just that next evolution of software development for us. In terms of beyond that, really, we're in a really good place with Go in terms of adoption. Most teams are largely in a place where they have made significant or complete inroads into moving to Go. So a lot of our legacy .NET estate has been migrated away. There's some aspects in some teams that are yet to fully complete their journeys. But again, that's also an exciting opportunity to join the organization, because if you want to join the organization where we've got some of the most challenging technical problems, want to help with re-architecture, moving into a much more modern language, quite a fast-paced environment. Again, buzzwords, but definitely a reality at Bet. We operate in lots of different markets, have lots of different operational sort of pressures and demands through different sporting events throughout the year. We're juggling many sort of plates, really. So from a technology point of view, there's a lot of things we have to cater for and support. AI is one of many of those things. So I think it's an exciting time to join.
For sure. I'm glad you mentioned AI. I think it's a legal requirement that we have to discuss
is, yeah.
AI at some point on a podcast in 2025. No, again, fantastic to hear that, Bet is leveraging AI, as other businesses, across the globe are grappling with how to leverage it and how to best introduce it into their systems. It sounds like, Bet is well on the way on that journey.
Yeah.
Awesome. Look, that was a kind of wrap up for our questions today. Was there anything else you wanted to share? Anything else we haven't covered? Anything else at all that you wanted to share with the listeners?
I guess from my point of view, just some advice really. So from a thing I've always been really passionate about is side projects. Some of the interviews I've done, perhaps over the last 12 months, people will use a side project as part of their interview. They'll perhaps open up a Git repo, load a demo site or an application, and that sometimes has won them the interview. It's not necessarily been, that 4 years of academic experience. It's actually been this really cool thing they've gone off and done off their own back. So I'm really passionate on people who have kind of gone out their own way to build something and been able to go, look, this is a really cool thing I've done over here. Let me show you how it works and why I've done it. And normally those things where people have got the freedom to build stuff and then they present it back in interviews, it's been great. For us, Bet's recently kind of restructured itself to have more full stack teams. And previously we had quite teams which were more focused in different areas. So when we see someone in an interview demonstrate, they've built a UI front end, a back end service, and then this other component over here, it kind of really ticks a lot of the boxes for me in the sense that, someone's gone out of the way to build something that, crosses multiple tech sort of paradigms, whether it's the UI layer, back end, or a tool or something. Equally, if someone's just built something that's really mad and crazy, and it's like, that's really cool. Why did you build that? And those sort of things around a conversation, it's like, okay, cool. But sometimes, for me, those are the things that win people an interview. It's like they've gone out their own way to build this thing. And I've done a couple of hackathons in my time and built some really random, wacky things. But equally, people have brought those to like interview sort of settings, and it's great to go, I built this thing over here. I munged all these technologies together to build this thing over here. And it's like, that's ace. That's really good. Tell us why you did that. Why did you do that? Well, I only had 48 hours because I was up all night doing this with a slice of pizza. And it's like, cool, that's interesting. So it's just understanding how people tick and understanding their problems. So I encourage people to look at like side projects pretty seriously. And I do think in an interview setting, if you have worked on something that you're really passionate about, that you perhaps weren't necessarily considering taking to an interview, I'd probably encourage people to do that, right? You bring it along and go, this is what I built, why did I build it? And share a bit of a story. It goes back to what I was saying about people's career progression and those development portfolio plans. It's not a checkbox exercise. We're more interested on why was that support ticket really difficult? What did it take to complete it? So when someone goes, I've done this side project, it's the same thing. Why did you pick it? Why did you do it? Why did you build it? Why did you write that blog about it? And you get some really interesting stuff. So for me, anyone who's wanting to do a side project or interested in doing one, I think they should explore.
Yeah, 100%. Couldn't agree more. We do a lot of work with universities, and we talk through, a lot of that hiring at the junior level in particular is around your aptitude and your attitude, your ability to learn and the passion that you can evidence. And I think the best way to evidence that passion and to show that attitude and to show that you're bought in and you love building things is to show something you've built, right? So couldn't agree.
And you don't necessarily have at that stage, you don't have all these years worth of experience to put on a CV, but if you can go, don't have that, but I do have this really cool Git project I can show you, and load it up and spin it up for you. It's like, that's ace. That's really good. Why do you do that? And that sometimes is enough to, clinch a job interview and get a successful result just by building out something or doing a hackathon or something like that. Those are great sort of places to be because you immerse yourself with individuals who want to build something in a very short space of time to deliver something. So really big on that sort of stuff.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. Look, great way to round out with some really tangible advice, I think, for anyone out there listening in at any stage of their career. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And look, thanks so much for joining us today, Adam. You've been a great guest and giving out lots of great wisdom and a great insight into bet365.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Awesome. And thank you out there to everyone else listening in. Stay tuned for another episode of the DevLab podcast. Obviously, make sure to like, subscribe, and share the episode when we get it out to you. And we'll see you next time. Thanks all. Bye-bye.